government get this one right, you are saying that this could be a multi-trillion-dollar investment opportunity.
Absolutely.
Just elaborate on that if you can.
So if you look at it, India is a fast-growing economy. GDP growth without digitization would have probably been about 6.5% a year for the next decade. The good thing with digitization is doing, apart from bringing more cash into the economy, etc., is that I think the big killer app here is credit, because the problem with India was that most of the lending on the formal sector was going to collateralized debt. So either it was going to large corporates or it was going for mortgages. And the reason was that banks, the formal system, did not have access to data of individuals like me. If I wanted to go and take a personal loan, they didn't have data. If an SME went to the banks and said, I want a loan, they were like, who are you? Give me a property as a collateral, or I'll charge you 20%, etc. They didn't have the data. But now what digitization is doing in various forms, and we have discussed that in the report.
It's easier to track credit history.
It is going to be much easier to track credit history. So the SME can go to the bank and say, I want credit, and here's my credit history, and you can download it from a GST portal or something, and that will allow banks to be able to lend much more effectively. So the credit will flow to the right part of the economy. Our view is that creates employment opportunities, that increases GDP over the next per year by about 50 to 75 basis points. So if GDP growth, the real basis is 7.1%, nominal is about 11%. I mean, that means economy and markets can do very well.
Let me just challenge you on a couple of points. Aren't we getting a little bit carried away here? Because in order to implement this, the banks have to be in a financially robust position. The problem with the state banking sector, as you and I know, is that they are struggling with non-performing assets, and credit growth has been somewhat subdued. Are we at the high water mark, or is it going to get worse, or have we stabilized at this point?
So if you asked me this question 3 weeks back, my answer would have been very different. But now the problem is, the biggest tail risk to this is state-owned banks, because they are 60% of the system, lending system. They didn't have capital. They were sitting on NPLs or bad loans, which were 10 to 15%, depending on the bank we are talking about. They are not making too much of profits to make provisions on those bad loans, and they did not have capital. And the government was historically saying, I am only going to give capital in a piecemeal way. Our view was to solve the problem once and for all. They needed about $35 to $40 billion of capital. What the government has done through this recap plan, obviously we need to wait for the final details to come in, is that they're saying that banks will get $33 billion, which means I think the tail risk is taken out. It's not that state-owned banks will go all guns blazing and start growing from next year, but they're not going to contract anymore. So as the tail risk goes away and things is digitized, there are enough financial institutions in India which will be able to use that data and start growing.